All right, in this series of lectures, I'm going to go over microbial growth and nutrition. So the first thing that we talk about is the idea that we need a microbe needs to access nutrients from outside of itself, and we divide those nutrients into two different groups. A macronutrient is something that a cell or a bacteria needs in very high amounts. So they are nutrients that make up cellular structures and play a principal role in metabolic function, or building amino acids or nucleic acids, or proteins, or all those things that you need in really large amounts. So that's stuff like carbon and hydrogen and oxygen. Micronutrients are things that you need in smaller amounts. Sometimes they're used to regulate your enzymes. Sometimes you use them for cofactors on enzymes, or regulating osmotic pressure, all sorts of different things, which we'll talk about later. And so these are called micronutrients or trace elements. And so those examples of those are like manganese, zinc, nickel, iron. These are all sort of things that are used to help enzyme function. Now, all microorganisms have a metabolic type. When we first start learning about metabolic types, like in grade school, you learn about plants versus animals, and you learn that plants make their own food and animals have to retrieve their own food. And that term autotroph is a term used for a plant because they are self-food makers, whereas animals are heterotrophs and they obtain their food from outside. But now that we're in microbiology, we're going to talk specifically about the metabolic types of bacteria. And typically what we do when we talk about a metabolic type is we name that metabolic type both after the way that they generate their energy and where they get their carbon from. So the different options for obtaining energy or generating energy are trapping light energy or creating energy through chemical reactions. So trapping light energy is like what a plant does, and this is someone who does this to get their energy, or some organism that does this to get their energy is called a phototroph. And organisms that use chemical reactions in order to generate or get access to energy are called chemotrophs. Now, the carbon source, carbon you need because organic molecules, which make up all living things, is made out of carbon. It's one of the most important nutrients that you have, is your chemical makeup as a living organism. So the carbon source is important in your metabolic type. And organisms that obtain their carbon from carbon dioxide are called lithotrophs. And those that get it from organic compounds are organotrophs. So if we take those terms now and we combine them, you get a metabolic type. So what we used to call animals as a heterotroph, we now call them a chemoorganotroph, or an organism that obtains their carbon from an organic carbon source and uses chemical reactions in order to generate energy. Whereas a plant is considered a photolithotroph. They trap light to generate energy, and they get their carbon from carbon dioxide or CO2. Now, these are very common metabolic lifestyles. However, I went past one. Bacteria can do something that is unique just to them and archaea. So no eukaryotes can do this, but bacteria and archaea do this. And this is one of the most advanced or evolved forms of metabolism. And since bacteria and archaea have been around for so long, that's why they have been able to develop this ability. That is the metabolic type of a chemolithotroph. So chemo means that you get your energy is generated from chemical reactions, but lithotroph means you get your carbon from an inorganic source or from carbon dioxide. Now, methanogens, I mentioned methanogens because there are a lot of organisms, bacteria and archaea, that can produce sort of weird gases and can use different sort of sources for their energy generation other than carbon-based things. So methanogens are one of those, and methanogens are specifically organisms that produce methane from the use of hydrogen gas and carbon dioxide. And archaea do this, and some of them live in pretty extreme habitats. Now, when you think about, I know this is kind of weird to talk about, but cows are being blamed for depleting the ozone layer by, basically farting methane. And the reason why these cows are farting methane is because the organisms that live within their gut are breaking down and producing methane as a byproduct of their digestion. In the next video, I'm going to go on and talk about some ecological pressures that affect the life of a microbe.